All right, hello hackers. Welcome everyone coming from around the country and around the world. My name is Alex Berry, and I am super excited to be talking to you all about career transitions today. I know many of us are coming from a bunch of different academic and career backgrounds, and so hopefully you guys find this workshop really, really helpful. We're only going to be here for a good solid hour, so I want to make sure that we dive right into that amazing content we have for y'all. Switch this. Here we go. So, what are we going to talk about today? Again, we only got an hour, so we got to be pretty tight and efficient. So, first off, this is going to be a workshop that's all going to be about helping you guys go and navigate different types of career transitions. Whether you're going from high school over into your first kind of collegiate experience, whether you're going from a one type of non-technical role and you're trying to transition into technology and this is your first hackathon, whether you're someone like me and you've spent the last 5 to 8 years in technology and you're looking for something that's slightly different or slightly new, or maybe you're somewhere in between, then this workshop is really for you. We're going to go and talk about some of those sort of core steps and how you not just make career transitions, but make them a little bit less scary, a little bit more empowering, and kind of mitigate some of the risks that comes when you're trying to make any type of career or life transition. I'm also going to give you guys two really good kind of tactical toolkits about how you can better think and frame these really big and scary decisions, as well as how you can go into those decisions by picking the different stories from your life and really being able to translate those into really and maybe just like not just necessarily experiences, but kind of translate all those experiences from your life into the stories that you will need to help you go and get to that next level or to make that next play. Now, as we go through, we'll be taking questions. We'll be taking these questions through Slido. So please feel free to send in questions as they come in. We'll also have some time where we'll make sure that myself and my wonderful workshop moderators are going to go and we'll be checking that Slido periodically. So please send in questions as well. Now, just a little bit more about my story so you all have a good sense of who I am and where I'm coming from. So again, my name is Alex Berry and I use he, him pronouns. My professional career has actually gone and spanned really four big, major, giant corporations, right? I've worked for the pharmaceutical industry. I've worked for paper companies. I've worked for large chemical companies. And now I work for Intel as a technical program manager. Originally, I'm actually from Southwest Georgia over here in the United States, and I currently reside over in the Portland, Oregon area. So, kind of like the top left part of the United States, a little bit south of BC, Canada. But I've spent a lot of time traveling around the world, doing lots of different types of engineering projects, business-related projects, as well as different areas where you're able to go and kind of integrate different types of culture into either those business or those engineering things. And one of the things I've kind of learned from that is how important it is when you're trying to do a new project, or like myself, when you're trying to go and sort of completely shift into a new career, how important it is to not just, disregard your academic background, not just disregard your cultural background or some of the maybe not so savory elements of your professional background, but figure out those ways of how you can bring that in to your career story. And we're going to talk about that a lot today. Outside of work or professional stuff, you will oftentimes see me playing lots and lots of soccer, as well as doing lots of different types of mentoring and workshops like this around the world. So I know it's kind of sucks that we couldn't necessarily be in person for this hackathon, but super happy that I get to go and join you guys and help you all hopefully on your career journeys. The last thing I'm going to say before I dive into content is I know when we talk about career transitions, for a lot of folks, this can be a bit triggering, right? And for myself, I've gone through quite a number of career transitions. In the last 4.5 years, I've had 7 different roles. But all of those roles have really gone span for me trying to figure out what am I interested in? What is exciting? What really goes and energizes me? From all of those different roles, I came up with a whole bunch of different technical as well as sort of communication leadership skills. But a lot of those really ended up boiling down into like 3 core superpowers around facilitation, superpowers around being able to gamify things and make really boring and dry engineering content a lot more fun and engaging, and superpowers about being able to translate from kind of, the finance world over into the engineering world, and the product world over into the budgeting world, and the coding world back over into the social impact world. And all of that has really gotten funneled into having one career that's just had lots of different steps and transitions in it. Now, I tend to be a little bit lazy sometimes, and when I go and I start to like prepare for that idea of a career transition, it tends to sort of feel like this is something that you can always do tomorrow, that you can always sort of start tomorrow. And so to help you all with the idea of maybe not being like me and not postponing it to tomorrow, but being able to start today, we're going to go and we're going to give you guys a lot of those good practical tips of things that you can do today as you think about what your career transition looks like. Now, to do that, though, I need to know just a little bit more about you all. Unfortunately, since we can't be in person, it's almost like kind of like talking to a screen. So I do have a couple of polling questions just to get a sense of who you guys are and who I'm so lucky to be joined by today. So what I'm going to go and do, I'm going to actually go and bring over one of our Slideup polls that we went and that we created. So give me 1 second to go and kind of drag that over. And it's going to be super easy. So what you're going to go and what you're going to actually see on your screen is going to be a really, really kind of helpful. Give me 1 second to actually get there. There we go. You're going to see in this top left corner this wonderful little QR code that you can go and just take a quick picture of. And that will actually allow you to join our Slideup poll. So I'll give you everyone a second to go and kind of join our Slideup poll. And the question that I have for you all, just to kind of open us up, is, what is that secret talent, that hobby, that sort of superpower that you've been developing all during the pandemic? Have you been able to become an amazing shower singer? Are you someone who really likes to go into like microwave different meals? Are you a gardener? What's been that superpower that you've been developing? And again, I'll give folks a second to go to actually be able to join this broadcast. Ooh, acapella. Okay, I like that. Very nice. Always a wonderful thing when you can see people going and singing and cooking, singing as well. I love that. Anything else? What else do we have here? Ooh, I see a few folks who have gotten into cooking. That might actually come up later in our workshop. I've definitely gotten, maybe not myself dive into cooking, but I've definitely had other folks go and really dive into cooking. I'll see if there are any others that go and come in as well. And if not, I'll actually go ahead and go on to our next question as we go and we sort of move on through the workshop. But no, always really cool to go and see like the different skills that people are going and are bringing. It's always super, super important that we go and we figure out how to be able to translate some of the skills that we gain in some of those side projects, or even sometimes in that self-care or that rest time, and figure out what that can help to inform us about our own careers. So when we think about the career transition process, I really like to go and break it up into kind of 5 core steps. First, there's this idea of the ability to go and kind of like empathize and understand yourself. So are you a person who really, really likes to be in a highly fast-paced, quick-moving work environment? Or are you someone who likes to maybe take things slow, have more time to process, and really be able to go and have your own kind of thinking and wondering time? Are you someone who really, really enjoys lots and lots of people interaction? You want to be surrounded by people either virtually or in person all the time? Or are you someone who maybe kind of tends to gravitate more toward having those good sort of one-on-one interactions. Being able to go and to think about and to understand this for yourself can really, really help you figure out which types of career transitions are going to be trickier and which types of bets are going to be maybe more kind of in your favor versus which ones are you really going to struggle with. We also go and we like to go and think about what we call like the research or the considerations phase. So this is a little bit less about looking sort of inward at yourself and understanding your strengths and your weaknesses and your gaps. And this is a lot more of looking at the different types of job or career landscapes and figuring out, okay, what are the types of things that I need to understand about this job or understand about this role to really be powerful here, or to understand that maybe it's not for me. And we'll actually dive into that a little bit later in the workshop. The third step we like to talk about is preparing professional stories. So when I say professional stories, every day you go and you have amazing experiences that are going to translate into stories that talk about how you communicate, how you fight with people, how you disagree with others. And some stories are going to be more useful than others in a professional setting. So like over in the States, I go to grocery shopping, once a week, and I love grocery shopping, but maybe not always grocery shopping with hundreds of other people, right? And so that is a story I could bring in to go and talk about my comfortability with people and the way I like to interact with different folks in public spaces. But in an interview setting, would there be a story that was maybe more related to the nonprofits I'm able to work with and how I would interact with those people? Would that story be maybe more appropriate and more helpful and more indicative of the types of professional experience that I have that I would want to bring to the workplace? Right. So again, and we're going to talk a lot about like how you go and sort of figure out which stories to select, because again, you all have so many stories that might be hard to figure out which ones are going to resonate. And then lastly, we like to go and talk about the transitional phase. So like when you're actually executing that transition, when you're kind of making the final decision, going all in, whether for some of us that might be trying to go into actually get or accept or start interviewing for a new role. For many of us who are going from maybe high school to college, it might be, picking that university, picking that college, and in many cases moving away from home. Or for those of us who are in college right now and you're preparing for that internship, or you're preparing to go and to kind of transition out of school into your professional and your working world, this is also going to apply to you. And then finally, that fifth step, which many of us in the engineering and the technical world always forget, but it's how do we celebrate our wins, right? Whether you're someone who like really likes to go and get a whole bunch of friends together and really celebrate, or maybe you're like me, and your celebration is just a bottle of chocolate milk and watching some anime. It's really important after we go through what might be a really kind of mentally and emotionally draining career transition process that we're able to go calm down, breathe a little bit, and take some time to celebrate our wins and the lessons we learned. So another question that tends to come up a lot, and I'll actually go and bring this over to a Slideup poll as well, is this idea of why are career transitions so painful? And I would love to go and get a little bit of audience input on this one. So I'll go and I'll throw this up, and we'll get maybe just like 2 or 3 examples of, why you all think that career transitions can be so painful. And again, I'll give it a second for folks to go and enter in some ideas there. Again, why are career transitions so painful? One of the things that goes and comes to mind is, a lot of people go and they talk about the different types of risk that they go and see. Oh, yeah. Okay. So there's one idea. Someone went and put in here. It's because of a risk that they go and they have, and the risk that we see. We definitely agree with that. One of the things that we like to go and teach over at our career coaching shop is that there's really kind of comes down to sort of, oh, and I see another thing in the chat that just came up. It was that change can be scary. The three elements that we tend to go and teach over, and particularly that we'll teach in this workshop, is kind of like another way for you guys to sort of think about how to bucket this, right? And just like what we have over in the chat, it really goes and comes down to this idea of being able to manage change and risk. So 3 ways to kind of reframe or to restate that. The first thing I like to think about is the emotional risk. So when you are making a career transition, when you are and again, this could be going from, your undergrad to the professional world. It could be going from like high school over into college. It could be going from middle school to high school. There's that emotional risk of, oh my goodness, I might lose my social group. Or even if I am, if you're in one job and you're thinking of transitioning to another job, it can very much feel like you are leaving a group. You are leaving something that you're very familiar with, even if it's something that's maybe not as empowering for you. There's a huge emotional risk to trying something new. Then there's also a certain amount of ambiguity. For anyone who's ever gone and had to interview for jobs, sometimes that can happen very, very quickly. And sometimes the interview process can be weeks and weeks and weeks. So there's a certain amount of ambiguity for how long is this career transition going to last? How much effort do I need to put in? How much resources and time and energy needs to happen, And so for many people, just the ambiguity of not knowing how long a career transition is going to take means that they don't know how to appropriately go and kind of plan for it. And that can be really, really tough for folks. And then finally, there's this idea that we call like opportunity sizing. So let's say if you were like me when I was going and finishing undergrad and finishing school, when I was going and looking for certain internships, my very, very first internship offer sounded absolutely amazing. It was going to be working for a medical supplier. They were going to like fly me out to kind of a random part of the Midwest of the United States. I was going to be like on a manufacturing plant. And I thought it sounded really, really great because I had never had an internship. I knew nothing about the industry. I had very, very little experience. And so that opportunity in isolation seemed really, really great. But then I talked to one of my mentors and they were like, wait, Alex, this isn't really, really a good salary range. It's not that great an opportunity. You're going to be the only person of your age in like the whole like city. Here are some things to go into consider before you go and you make that decision. So they helped me go and realize that it was a cool opportunity, but it wasn't necessarily like a once in a lifetime opportunity. And for me, that was really, really helpful to consider. So again, when we think about why are these career transitions so painful, there's that emotional aspect. There's that kind of weird, like ambiguous aspect where we're trying to figure things out. And then there's this idea that it's really hard when you don't have the right perspective to size how great or how cool an opportunity really is, especially if you're in a position where you're truly trying to go and maybe get yourself out of a really tough situation. Now, the other thing that we really find very, very helpful to go and think about is what we call career considerations. And for us, this is a way that we like to go and kind of break down sort of the 3 buckets of things that folks should consider before you go and you make any type of like major career change, job change, and really when you're in that kind of research phase. So the way we love to break it down is that there's this technical aspect. There's this more kind of business aspect and considerations. And there are these sort of cultural considerations. But let's kind of talk about all 3. So on the technical side, this is where you go and where you're thinking, hey, can I learn this work? Can I complete this work? As a great example, let's say you were looking at a data visualization job, and that job really, really wanted you to be able to learn and do work within Microsoft's Power BI tool. Now, maybe you're like me and you're like, I don't know how to use Power BI. I've never had the chance to get exposure to this. But I know how to use Excel, and I know how to like learn another sort of querying language known as SQL. And if I can learn Excel and SQL and be really powerful at those, it will be much easier and much quicker for me to learn Power BI with some help and some mentorship. So even though I don't know Power BI right now, I feel really confident in my first couple of weeks at work with a little bit of help, support, and a lot of Googling. I can go and I can learn Power BI, right? So versus as a sort of a different type of example, my academic background is in industrial engineering, so I know lots of things about data engineering, data science, financial engineering, and that sort of stuff. I know nothing about chemical engineering. I know nothing about certain things within the physics and the mechanical engineering realm. Those aren't really my sort of core areas of expertise. So if you had a job where I needed to go and figure out how to go into a machine shop and to go and kind of like build something with my hands from scratch, honestly, I'd be like, that's not really for me. It's not something I'm really interested in, and it's not something that my current skills really translate well over to. On the business side and in the business considerations, this is what I like to think about. Not so much can I do the work, but am I willing to do the work? And am I willing to do the work for the time that it's going to require of me, for the amount of money and or compensation that I will get for creating value for you, and for the level of people interaction that I'm going to have. So a lot of things that people don't necessarily go and consider, especially when you're going to that first job or that second job, is, hey, is this like a traditional kind of, 40 to 45 hours per week type of job? Is it a job maybe where I'm on call, which is another way to say that, you at any time you might be at your house or kind of chilling with friends on a weekend, and you might go and get a call from work and you have to come in to fix something? Is it a shift type of job where you work very, very specific shifts and you only do work in that shift? Where I work over at Intel, many people work a manufacturing night shift where they might go and work, a Wednesday, a Thursday, a Friday, and every other Saturday. And that might be a 12-hour shift. And on the bright side, when they're not at work, when they're not on shift, they don't have to think about work at all. But when they are on work and then when they are on shift, it can be a really, really sort of very like strong period of focus. So again, none of these are necessarily better or worse, but it's really important for you to think about how do you work, how do you like to focus, and which of these is a best fit for you in your life. Another thing that people don't always consider in this category is like when we come to the, am I willing to do this work with like this level of people interaction? That's what I like to think of as, for the amount of interaction I'm going to have with a manager or a supervisor or, someone who is sort of helping me understand like what types of work needs to get done. Do you want to have that interaction where it's like you're talking with people, every single day, you're engaging with a manager or a supervisor every single day? Or maybe you're more of like, no, I want to talk with you once a month, figure out what I'm working on, and then move on, right? Another and the last thing I'm going to say in this category is that people don't often think about it, but I would argue that you're always going to be a manager at something. Sometimes you will come in and you might be managing other people. You might be coming in, you might be managing projects and programs. A very popular career in the computer science and the kind of coding world is product management, where you're really managing the features that go into different products. So, how great is the sound quality going to be within, a Spotify release, that kind of thing. But you might also be someone who manages tasks. You might be someone who goes in who manages a creative process, right? Every job you're going to be managing something, and you just have to really go and think about what do you want to be managing? What makes the most sense for you, right? For myself, I thought I wanted to go into people management because I thought I was good at it. I like to do a lot of leadership stuff. I like to talk a lot. But I didn't ever love the idea of having to go into, ever potentially have to go into maybe like fire someone, right? That seemed like really weird to me. I really like empowering, coaching, and lifting people up. I don't really love to go and necessarily like bring people down, right? So what I realized for myself is that project and program management, where I'm still able to coach people and I'm still managing the work, but I get to go and kind of shift and use my projects as the vehicle through which I help people go and grow. That sort of aligned a lot more with me, and I don't have to deal with a lot of the more bureaucratic elements that might come to being someone's direct manager. Like, I don't have to deal with someone's payroll. I don't really care about someone's, having to like manage other people's vacation times and scheduling. I just want to help people do work and be really powerful in that. And then finally, the third consideration. And after this, we'll go and we'll see if we have any questions over in the chat. But the third consideration that we have here is the culture consideration. Now, this is probably of all three of these, this is probably the one that is least looked at, but in many cases is the most important when you're thinking of job satisfaction or career satisfaction or work-life balance. And you can really summarize this as, does the work and the work culture and the people around me, do they energize me? Not, am I good at it? But does this actually go and energize me? Right? Especially when you're thinking about the industry you might be in. So like I work over into, my day job is in the manufacturing and the technology industry. And overall, that can be really, really interesting. It's very dynamic. There's always new things to go and learn. There's always new technology to come and demo. There's always a new computer to kind of take apart and figure out how it works. And like that, for me, that can be really exciting. Versus for other folks, they might go and say, hey, I really like the governmental sector. It's a little bit more stable, right? You're not always having projects go and change, every few months. And that stability for them can actually be really, really energizing. There's also to consider like the type of organization you're with. So I'm in a kind of a unique position where I, at the same time, both work for corporate America, have my own small business company, as well as work with a lot of nonprofits. And I see that those different organizations, not only do they have different cultures, but I get energized in different ways by those different organizations. The nonprofits help me go and realize how you can make a lot of big impact in a really, really, with very little dollars, with very, very little investment. And they really go and maybe energize me more emotionally. Versus a lot of the things that I do for work might go and help energize me really intellectually. And I love being able to go and kind of like use my skills and tackle some like really kind of big and complex problems. Versus over in like my small business organization, those types of things are more about like the one-on-one interactions that we have on a day-to-day basis, right? There's a lot of more like smaller tactical things we're doing as we grow that small business. So I love being able to learn about this random piece of finance or this random technology thing or this random marketing thing that I wouldn't have necessarily have learned in my regular Intel role. And then finally, and you all know this so much because you've worked in group projects, you're working on those wonderful hacker groups right now. Many of you all are working in these different sort of small teams to go and to deliver different products. So that the team and the team you're working with makes all the difference in the world, right? For myself, I almost kind of prioritize like the team and people I'm working with over the products I might be delivering. Because when you're working with a really, really great team of people, just like when you're hanging out with some really great and amazing friends of yours, it almost doesn't matter what you're doing, right? And so for a lot of people, they might be in an industry that's not their favorite industry. They might be in an organization that's not necessarily their favorite organization. But if they love their team and they get energized every day that they get to work with their team, that might actually be enough to give them that fulfillment that they need to either stay in a role, or when they're looking for a new role, when they're considering a new role or a new job or going to a new school, is really, really important to understand like who's going to be on my team. And are these folks who are going to be on my team, do I vibe with them? Do they give me energy? Are they going to help me figure out what I'm good at or figure out what maybe I'm not so good at? So I'm going to go and pause there really quickly and bring it over to the Q&A. So I'm just going to go and come over here just to go and see if we have any questions over in the Q&A. So one thing that I do go and see here is that many might not be able to go and to see this event. So hopefully that's something that Angel and Leon that we can go and kind of take care of on the back end. But we do see that, Monique. And also don't worry, we are also recording these and making these available on YouTube Live. So if you're having trouble seeing anything from like the regular StreamYard broadcast, you can also go to YouTube Live and watch this as well. And we'll make sure to drop that over into the chat just so that people can go and can make sure that you're able to go and have access to this. But are any other questions coming up for anyone who's here? And if we don't have any questions, I'll also go and just kind of keep moving on. Oh, perfect. Excellent. Awesome, Monique. Super, super happy about that. Yeah. Any other questions that people have on the content we have so far? I'll give it a second. And of course, if anyone's has put in questions either on the YouTube Live or on Hopin, we'll be going and kind of transferring these over to the Slideup so everyone can see. So one question that just went and came in is, how do you figure out if something doesn't energize you versus you're just not skilled enough yet? Ooh, I love this question. So I would say, especially for certain things in the technical domain, like learning a new computer science language or trying to go and to get better at like UI UX design. If something energizes you, but you're maybe not great at it yet, you're going to go and you're going to just naturally find yourself spending, additional hours just diving into that material. So as a great example, I thought that I didn't really like finances and accounting because it just seemed really boring to me. But financial engineering, which is building lots of different types of models to go and kind of predict the future, I love that. But I honestly wasn't that great at math, and I'm still not that great at math. So even though I struggled with it, I found myself just naturally asking people for help. I found myself naturally spending additional hours, especially in undergrad, just kind of doing my own research and trying to figure out all the different steps that I needed to do because this area was just so naturally interesting for me. Versus there are some things that maybe that you are really, really skilled in that don't energize you. And a great way to figure out whether something doesn't energize you is after you have done it, are you just super tired and drained and just like, ugh. So, for example, I'm a relatively okay public speaker, but when I'm talking to really, really big and large crowds, I'll do it and I'll be really hyper and energized. But right after that, I am tired. Like I am pooped. I am knocked out. I'm back over in my like little burrito blanket and I'm just passed out for the rest of the day. So it's not necessarily that I'm not good at it or not skilled in it, but it's more of this just is something that's going to go and drain me. And that's something that I just have to be really, really cognizant of going forward. So really, really good question there. I love that one. I'll give it another second to see if we have any other questions come in. But I really like that question. It's super important to understand like where are some of the things that maybe you just need a little bit of help and mentorship in versus where are those areas that are really, really energizing for you. Great question. And so not necessarily seeing any other questions come in, I'm going to go and move into one of my other favorite topics, which is going to be all about some of the things around the storytelling angle and, how can we go and think about the stories that we go and we select. And of course, if other questions come up, just let us know. We'll be looking at the chat as well. So please, please, please keep the questions flowing and coming. Now, but one other thing that I want to talk about before we get into the sort of story selection, figuring out how to pick your best stories, is oftentimes when people are thinking about making a sort of career jump or just trying out a different type of role, or maybe if you're over in school, trying a different major or trying a different class, is they feel that there is a certain type of gap between where they are and where they're trying to go. And that gap can be really scary, right? One thing that we think that helps make it a little bit less scary is to figure out what type of gap is it. And if we can figure out what type of gap you have, we can figure out how we can help you close it. So the 3 types of gaps that we talk about most often are gaps in context, gaps in capabilities, and gaps in mindsets. We actually don't talk as much about a gap in experience, and I'll explain all that in a second. So when I say a gap in context, so let's say if I were looking to go into get a job working in the service industry, so working in a restaurant, waiting tables, that kind of thing. And maybe I've never gone and had a job, right, waiting tables. I've just never necessarily had that particular context. And so I might go and say to myself, okay, even though I've never gone and waited tables, do I have something in my experience? Do I have the right skill sets to do that? Am I personable enough? Do I know enough about money? Do I know enough about customer service? Is there some other type of context or something else from my experience that can transfer over to help make up for the fact that I don't maybe have a right context? In the same way, kind of bring it to a more computer science example. For many of you hackers who are here with us today, you might go and be looking at trying to get that first internship or that first kind of role where someone's kind of paying you to go and code. Well, if you've never had that before, it's kind of this weird catch-22 where it's I need experience to get the experience, but the experience I want to get requires experience. So we would almost go and say, what context do you have that can maybe transfer? Could you transfer over your hackathon experience? Could you transfer over some of your academic projects? Could you transfer over some of your side projects and your passion projects to help show to people that you actually have the right capabilities? Now, moving over to this kind of second career gap, right? When we talk about the capability. So again, maybe let's go and sort of stick with this realm of, we're in the computer science realm. We're looking at going and grabbing another internship, and you have a certain set of skills. Maybe if you're like me, where I got really good with languages like Python or learning things like SQL and doing different types of data manipulation. But I remember way back, 3 or 4 years ago, there was a job I was interviewing for that actually required a lot of project management skills. And so I've got a lot of these great data related technical skills, but they were specifically looking for some project management skills. And that was a capability that I was like, oh man, I haven't done a lot of formal project management. So for this type of gap, I had to really go and kind of break apart okay, what is really included in project management, right? There's a lot of communication. There's a lot of organizing people. There was a lot of just understanding basic things about financing and how much time and energy of your amazing people cost and how to motivate folks. And so even though I did not necessarily have the formal skill of project management, I was able to go back and kind of come back to some of those previous contexts that I had. So student organizational leadership, where I got to essentially manage really large groups of students to help them spend millions of US dollars. I was able to go back to running really small teams to help them go and to accomplish something on a very specific cadence. And so even though I felt I didn't have a formal project management type of role or a formal project management sort of expertise to really draw on, I was able to go back to those previous levels of context from different undergrad and high school leadership opportunities and really think about what capabilities do I have that are close enough to this capability that sort of show that I have a certain amount of experience that people wouldn't necessarily get. So for me, that was a really helpful way to go and kind of close that capability gap and to, at the very least, make myself feel really confident about applying to some of those more project management related positions, which is what I do now. And then finally, there's kind of that mindset gap. So a really classic example of this is some folks who maybe you might start within the corporate America space, or just like the corporate space in general, corporate America, corporate Canada, who might start over in these like big, large, well-funded multinational companies, but eventually want to shift over into the nonprofit or the government space. Maybe they understand how to go into work within these areas. Maybe they have all the skills they need, but they really struggle with the mindset shift. Very stereotypically over within a corporate environment, you tend to have a lot of resources, and you're really trying to figure out and prioritize like where do you want to go and spend those resources, right? And you have to make some very, very difficult business decisions of, we got $1 million. Where does that go, right? How can we use this $1 million and use our resources to go and make the next $1 million? Versus over within a more stereotypical nonprofit environment, you're probably going to have less resources, right? But you might have a very, very central and core mission that you're really driving toward, or a socioeconomic problem that you're trying to solve, such as homelessness, such as food insecurity. So you might have a very, very strong focus, and now you're just figuring out how to work in a resource-constrained environment. That mindset shift when going from one area over to the other can be really, really difficult to go and to overcome. And oftentimes, especially for folks who are trying to do any type of social impact work, or who are trying to like take their, more corporate sort of context and capabilities and bring that over to the nonprofit space, really have to spend some time figuring out, what types of skills can apply over in this nonprofit space, what types of things are going to be the most helpful, right? Maybe it's not your coding ability. Maybe it's your ability to go and to lead others. Maybe it's not how well you can go and develop a new website or develop a new piece of technology, but it might be how well you can teach others to do that. So sometimes the mindset shift can be really, really tricky to get, and to go and kind of make that sort of shift. But we've definitely seen a lot of folks be successful in this space as long as you spend a lot of time and you talk to folks and you say, what is it like working in this area, and what's different about the problems you face versus the problem I face in my area. So again, to recap, you've got the context gap, you've got that capability gap, and you've got that mindset gap. I didn't necessarily go and specifically bring up an experience gap, like, oh man, like I'm not able to go and to apply or to get this role or to make this jump because I'm missing or lacking an experience. And the reason we don't really focus on that is because oftentimes we think it's an experience that's the reason, but because just as you go through, as you live your life, as you go through school, as you go and you do different side projects or more formal projects, you are gaining experience. And so oftentimes it's not understanding, do you have the right context? Do you have the right capabilities? Or is it more of a mindset shift that you need to make? That's really tends to be what prevents us from being able to be really powerful and being able to close those career gaps. And again, folks, as we go, as I'm talking, please feel free to go and throw any questions over into the chat as they come in. We'll definitely go and we'll be looking at that. And I'll be sort of looking at Slideup as well, just to see if any other questions are coming in. So I'll give it another minute or so just to see if anything else hops in before we go to our sort of last topic for the day. All right, and not seeing any other major questions, I'm going to actually go and go to the next slide. So here we wanted to go and to make sure. Oh, wait, sorry, I spoke too soon. I do see a question coming over here in the chat. So let me go and kind of come back to this one. So this question, and if I mess this up, please let me know. But this question is, experience is often a barrier for employers. So how do you explain a lack of experience or gaps in resume? So two things to go and think about here. So I'll address the gaps part of a resume first, then I'll come back to like the lack of experience. So this is in the scenario when you are sort of talking with an employer and you're trying to explain to them, your experience. You're trying to explain to them sort of like why you are qualified to create value in the way that they're looking for. So when it comes to the gaps in your resume, and this is one of a very, very few silver linings of this kind of very strange pandemic that's affected the world. People are a lot less concerned about what you haven't been doing over in the global pandemic. So there are many folks who have taken a career gap. There are many people who have taken some type of pause from work. They have been laid off, unfortunately, or they've had to make some very sort of strong and kind of crazy changes to their life to figure out how to pay bills or to allow time to transition to another career or to build up different skills. So instead of going and sort of emphasizing, hey, for the last year, I've been out of work while I try and like sort of figure things out. Instead, what you want to do on your resume is focus on what you have been doing during that time. So have you been going and been teaching yourself different aspects of computer science? Have you been going and, creating virtual communities and using that as a way to sort of stay connected with people? How have you been developing your skills during that period of a gap? I know for many folks who are parents and who maybe have to take time off of work so they can help go and raise their kids. Well, is all you're doing raising your kids, or are there other areas that you've been able to kind of stay up on the industry? Have you been reading different types of economic articles? Have you been learning to kind of code in your spare time? Have you been working on maybe that one passion project over the last like few months as you've been looking for that next role or that next career? So again, emphasizing not so much the gap in formal employment, but instead going and emphasizing what you've been doing in that gap, right? How have you been learning? How have you been growing? And in many cases, how have you been failing? Like, what have you been figuring out that you're not good at? That can be just as valuable to a potential employer as this formal experience that you went and had. And then kind of coming back to the first part of that question, how do you explain the lack of experience? Again, don't focus on explaining the lack of experience. Focus on what do you have and what are you bringing to the table. For most types of interviews, you really only need sort of 3 kind of core stories or like 3 really core experiences to go and say, hey, I'm really good at, let's say in my case, I'm really good at translating different types of content. Here's a story that backs that up. I'm really good at data visualizations, and here's a story that backs that up. And I'm really good at gamifying things and making really complex topics really fun and engaging. Here's a story that backs that up. Focus on what you're bringing to the table and focus on your strengths. And don't worry nearly as much about all the things you're not good at. So that's just kind of how I would answer that question. And I love it because it's a great one. And I see one other question over here in the chat. And it's really relating to how do you start making projects using Python, right? Let's say you just learned it. And especially Python, which is, one of maybe not easier languages to learn, but it's definitely a lot simpler than something like, using a software like MATLAB. It's a very high level language. And on the bright side, that also means that there's lots of really great resources online, like going to codeacademy.com. Python has actually its own sort of library and its own website where you can actually go and download data sets. So people will say, hey, I want to show you how to do a cold data manipulation, or I want to show you how to use this Python software to like do 3D modeling, which is kind of a weird use for Python. But so you can actually go and use those sort of pre-built packages to go and kind of figure out and learn how does Python work. And this not just for Python, but for any computer science language. You can go and you can actually find public data sets, often coming from different government data or different public health data. And you could actually go and use that to create your own visualizations, right? Create your own projects. So you never necessarily have to wait for someone else to give you that resources. It's just, what are you interested in learning about? Can you find a data set to go into model and manipulate? And then you're just kind of YouTubing and asking for different mentors to go in to help you learn the different libraries, the different pandas, and the different data manipulation tools that Python has. So really, really great question there. I love that one. Not seeing any other questions, I'm going to go and keep going for the last piece that we have. I'm going to go and breeze through this to keep us on time. We have about 10 minutes left. And we're going to spend some time talking about creating your best narrative. So you're preparing for that interview. And this could be a scholarship interview. This could be an interview for an internship. This could be an interview for a full-time role. It could be an interview for a startup. It could be just walking into a grocery store and figuring out what in the world do you want to talk to people about when they're checking you out in the line at MBQ. And we really like to break up this into sort of like these three core areas where there's a listening component, there's a crafting component, and then there's the actual sort of like telling component. So when we talk about listening, or what we call like story listening, you've got to remember that human beings are natural storytellers. Like we love telling stories, right? It's why things like movies are always so engaging, because we tell a story in a very visual and auditory way, right? We love consuming that information, and we love giving information in this way. And because of that, you should know that humans are naturally going to be listening for certain types of stories. And when you're trying to figure out whether or not your story is a really, really good one, it tends to come down to that people are listening for four things: transferable context, demonstrated skills, emotional intelligence, and emotional anchors. When we say transferable context, what we mean by that is, if, again, let's say we're in the coding environment, and you're interviewing with the Alex computer science company to get an internship, I'm definitely listening in the stories that you bring to the table. You know, is there a transferable content? Have you ever done a coding internship or something similar to the type of coding that I'm going to want you to do over for my internship, right? I'm listening for that context. But I'm also listening for demonstrated skills. You know, maybe you haven't done an internship in a company, you know, that's like my size or in my industry, but you see that I need, you know, someone who knows Python, someone who knows SQL, someone who knows Power BI, and you're able to tell a story about how you've demonstrated those very specific skills. Then there's also the emotional intelligence angle, which maybe historically in technology careers hasn't been emphasized as much, but especially when you're looking at roles like product development, product engineering, product management, and really going and understanding different users and customers and building things that they actually want, this emotional intelligence angle is going to be so much more important. And how you demonstrate this in your stories that you bring to the table is by figuring out, how are you telling stories that show how you had to listen to people? How are you telling stories, and are you demonstrating these stories where you're working in a team, where you're resolving conflict? Or are you only bringing stories where you're by yourself, staring at a computer all day, coding by yourself, right? It's really, really great when you can bring in stories where you worked in a team to solve a problem, and maybe you had to work in a team internally to sort of deal with, you know, different creative directions, right? And then finally, there are these emotional anchors within your stories. So when I say emotional anchors, think of those things that really represent a commonality between you and maybe the person you're talking to. For example, I love soccer. I'm a big soccer fan. Not as big on the MLS over here in the States, but in general, I love playing soccer and I love watching other people play soccer. So an emotional anchor for me is when I meet someone and they're like, oh my gosh, I also like soccer. I'm like, boom, instant connection. That's something that we don't necessarily intentionally listen for, but very passively, where you can see it when someone goes and kind of perks up and they're like, ooh, another soccer player who also happens to be a coder, who also is really emotionally intelligent, right? That's just kind of what we're naturally listening for. Now, when you think about what types of stories you want to make sure you carry with you, and again, like these should be stories, like you should have at least maybe one story that's like your sort of your go-to leadership story. One story that's maybe your go-to story about the role you like to play on a team. You know, are you a person who is really, really independent and you can handle tasks very independently? Are you a person who is like the support character, right? You're not necessarily going to carry the team by yourself, but you're always going to be there with, an extra thing of water. You're always going to be looking out for what are the other teammates' weaknesses and how can you help address them, right? And then, of course, you're always going to want a story that really reflects your domain expertise. So a story that really goes and shows that you are good in whatever that thing is that you're trying to go and get a role in. If it's Python, cool. Show me a story about how you took a public data set and you made a visualization of it. If it's like myself over in, industrial engineering, show me that story about how you were able to do some really cool process improvement. Doesn't necessarily matter if it was process improvement for a big giant company or process improvement for a club that you're working in. For those of us who are coming from the non-tech domain, this could be your domain expertise as a teacher, your domain expertise as a historian, your domain expertise as a leader or a leadership coach. But the really core thing that I want you all to take away from this is that if you prepare these 3 types of stories with you ahead of time, it can very much shorten how much time you need to actually prepare for interviews, prepare for scholarship applications, or even go and prepare for certain types of full-time offers. Again, when you think about that leadership story, you're really trying to emphasize a time when you are not just like leading other people, but sort of that emphasize how do you communicate and how do you make those really tough decisions, right? On that teamwork story, you really want to go and be able to show when you're going or you want a story that shows not just like what type of role you're playing in a team, but also how do you deal with conflict when it happens. Conflict in your stories isn't bad, but what matters is how you deal with it. And of course, on the domain expertise side, that's really going to depend on what your domain expertise is. But you do want to have a good sense of if you're, a project manager, for example, like myself, you got to have a story that shows that you're a good project manager. And really with that, folks, that's actually the last thing that I wanted to go and to bring up. I'm going to go and kind of check the chat one more time before we go and we sort of show our final survey. So as I'm checking the chat here and just seeing if we have any other final questions, definitely want to thank you all for coming out. Whether you're looking at this live or you're looking at this for recording of this, and really hope that you all are able to go and to think about your hackathon experience and how that's going to translate into the amazing stories that you're going to tell, not just now, but really far into the future. So major thank you for everyone who was able to come, and I'm going to check the chat and see if you have any other final questions before I actually go and bring up the final survey we're going to have you guys take just to see how this workshop was. So as I look here, we have, I think, one more final question coming into the chat, so let me look at that. Any tips on deciding on smaller versus bigger companies? In other words, what size company you would like to work at and how that risk might influence your career. So the short answer to this, because this is all really long, there's some really long ways to answer this, but when you're thinking about the company that you're going to, you have to go and really weigh 3 things. What type of management style is that company going to have me under? What type of mastery is that company going to give me? And what type of money or compensation am I going to get from this company? Oftentimes when you're earlier in your career, the mastery element is going to be more important, right? So if I'm debating between going to company A or company B in a software development role, and company A is going to give me the chance to master more of my field, maybe I'll be a full stack developer over there, and I'm going to really get to go and understand the front end, the back end, different frameworks, coding in an agile style, but it's slightly less paid than company B. Earlier in my career, I'm probably going to shift to company A because that mastery element is going to make me so much more powerful in the future versus when maybe you're later in your career, well, then the mastery element isn't as important because you've already kind of found your niche. You have a much better sense of what your strengths are and what your experiences are. And so then you might be a little bit more cognizant of the amount of money you're looking to make, the amount of financial stability you have, especially for those of us who are thinking about starting families, right? The management piece is going to be important no matter where you go. So there's not necessarily that small companies have better managers or big companies have better managers. But I will say that for bigger and larger companies, you're going to have a lot more variation in the management level, right? So at a big company, you might have some areas that have really great and amazing managers. Where I work at Intel, I think I have a great manager, but there's also those managers who aren't so great. And you're going to have that huge variation in a big company versus in a smaller company, you're going to get like a much more standard average. So really, really good question there. And as this last question that just went and came in, is it more difficult to find a job as a generalist or as a specialist? Oof. That's a tough one. A lot of jobs will say that they are maybe looking for a specialist. But then the job requisition, the thing you see online when you apply, it will basically ask for you to have all the skills in the world. So I think that for many people that can feel really, really frustrating. You've all, I'm sure, have seen like the Instagram post or the LinkedIn post or the TikTok post where it's like entry-level job asking for 30 years of experience, right? I would go and say that how this actually goes and plays out is that it definitely benefits you to go and have a bit more of a generalist mentality, but to be able to go and say, here are 3 things that I'm really strong and confident in. For like a lot of my day job and over like my past maybe 4 or 5 years doing 7 or so different roles, I've had to go and kind of context switch between very technical work and very non-technical work and very finance work versus very like data science work. But as I was going through that, I definitely built up a few specialties where I can say, you can put me in any project and I can do process improvement. You can put me in any project and I can do project management. Put me on any team and I can be like a strong strategic facilitator. So even though like I can work in a lot of different areas, I still have like those 3 specialties that I can base my interview stories off of, and I can use to kind of craft the portfolio that I bring to people. But I would go and say that sometimes people think they're looking for a specialist and they will ask for a generalist. So that does make stuff really tricky. With that, folks, I believe we're actually right around the end of our workshop. Really, really love those amazing questions that we went and we had. I'm actually going to go and bring over the survey over to like the main screen because I want to make sure that we all can go and can see the new our like final survey poll that we have. So let me go and bring this up, or Leon, if you're there, feel free to go to make sure that we have this poll activated. So it's just a really, really brief survey. We would love we only have 94 questions, and we just want to know how we can improve not just this workshop, but all the other workshops we have at Hack the North. Again, thank you guys so much for going and for joining us today. And for anyone who is like looking to go and take notes or has some follow-up questions, over in the Hack Pack that Leon and Angel will go and we'll make sure that is submitted and sent out to all of you. You can find my contact information as well as a good 1 to 2 page handout that actually covers almost all the content we went over today. So again, thank you all very, very much. Please fill out our workshop survey so we know how to go and improve. And feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn if there's any other stuff that I can help you all with. Have a great rest of your day.